Terry thinks he's just coming to an ordinary guest of honor interview. So we're going to give him a little surprise. Don't give it away.
All right.
Terry, you thought you were here just to do an ordinary guest of honor interview. Really, you did. But we've got something special cooked up. Terry Pratchett, Disc is your world. Now,
but isn't this lovely? It's a present from the goddess Anoia. He actually turned out to be Australian, and I swear now, once we got the mice out of my desk, yes, we have desk mice. I know it's true. We've actually had to make a hole in my desk so the cat can get into the secret drawer. So I shall have a drawer just for this to be stuck in. Go ahead.
Now, I'd better explain the format for what's happening.
You better.
Because it's a very novel concept and it hasn't been done before. What we have done is assembled in person and in some cases offline people who have played a significant role in the history of the Discworld books and your authorship of those. And we'll be using them to go back and give us a retrospective of these last 25 years and hopefully to find material that you've forgotten. And make the event a surprise for everybody. Terry, can you tell us how the Discworld first came to mind?
The choice is yours. Would you like the truth or the rather better fabrication or journey? The fabrication.
We can always edit.
Okay, I know how to sort this out. I will give you the fabrication, but I will tell you it's the truth. After all, why break the habit of a lifetime?
We can edit this to make it seamless later, okay?
Around about the beginning of the 80s, there was an awful lot of fantasy fiction around. Some of it good, and some of it not so good. And an awful lot of it had been written by the people who had been influenced by the people who had been influenced by the people who had been influenced by Tolkien. And they weren't bringing anything new to the party. In fact, I was very annoyed, even as late as 1991, to turn over the pages of an award-winning American fantasy novel and read that someone had said, belike he will wax wrath. Really? I've lived in vain and still write this crap. Belike he will wax his cycle clicks, you know. Belike he will wax the piano, but if we can't get rid of this terrible mock medieval speech, we can't do anything at all. I just wanted to write another book. I wrote a book periodically. I didn't think very much about it. I didn't really think of myself as a writer. I thought of myself as a journalist. And I just wanted to write a kind of fantasy fiction book. And it was really a collection of 4 novellas. I just went for it. How can I put this? When I sit down to write now, I type the word "the," and I realise that millions of people are going to. That was hiding me from them. I thought it was a poem. I realised it's going to be read, and that first time I thought, oh, some people will read it, and it was great fun. I could do anything I wanted because no one expected anything of me. I'd done a few books which had done kind of okay, but it wasn't going to be a big deal, so I just went for it. I plunged in, and I parodied, and I made fun of the good and the bad, and in some cases even the ugly. And that was it. And one of what really did happen with the writing of Discworld is it opened the floodgates on the huge backlog, or shall we say, the huge compost heap of my reading in previous years about folklore, about history, about all kinds of things. Like a lot of people, I read very, very widely in obscure places. And this was all sort of bubbling out. For example, Death turns up originally in Colour and Magic, and is based on a story from the Arabian Nights called Appointment in Samara, and I guess did a little parody on that. And suddenly I had introduced a character who has become actually one of the most popular characters on the Discworld, Death. People write to him and say, Auntie May was very pleased with your character of Death, and we used to take the Discworld books up to her all the time she was in the hospice. And then people write to me and say, and this one you won't laugh at. Some kid has died, someone has died, and the parents say he or she was a real Discworld fan and would love some words from Death. And I look around and there's plenty of things in the books, plenty of quotes that we can pick up, because Death is a fairly beneficent character in Discworld. And I write them down and I send them. On one occasion, I have to say, there was a kid with leukemia. And it's always seemed to be the bright kids that get leukemia, and authors go off to hospitals, with a t-shirt and that sort of thing, and it can be rather depressing. And this kid wanted Death to visit him in hospital. And I thought, well, I could have a word with Stephen Biggs, who's got a good costume, but I mean, really, it's going to be a little bit on the difficult side. Because, I mean, after all, he's going to have to walk through other wards. And it's a kind of the terrible dark humour. I will add one small thing. I mean, what I'm really saying was, I did it for the sheer fun of it. I didn't know there was going to be a sequel. When there was a sequel, I didn't know that there was going to be a third book. It was as if the original idea dropped a snowflake and it became an avalanche. And an avalanche took me and my life along with it. And I am certainly not complaining about that, but that was pretty much how it happened. There was one particular thing I remember from that note. Authors get asked to do things all the time. And someone, a nurse wrote in, from Glasgow, I think, saying we have a boy in intensive care. I forget what exactly he had. It was basically he was allergic to the 20th century, and he was in a bubble. And she said, is it possible to get books that have been sterilised? And I kept this, no, printing houses are pretty grubby places. You can't make them disease. But Transworld said, maybe we could send tapes, because they are produced in reasonably hygienic environments. So we sent off a bunch of tapes, and the nurse wrote back, which is slightly unusual. Lots of people find it easier to ask for favours than to thank you for having received. And said they'd been received. And that was it. And I didn't hear any more for years and years and years. And then one day I was doing a signing in Glasgow, and suddenly there was this whack on the back of on my back, and I turned around and there's this strapping young man. He said, "I'd just like to thank you for those tapes." No, they were really great. Thank you very much. And I almost burst into tears. Oh, Christ, one of them actually survived. But they were kind of more simple days than they were. I got on the old signing tour treadmill, and it was a treadmill in those days. And it was a time when there was a lot of takeover of bookseller unto bookseller. And it was not unusual to go off to do a signing in a Dillons, and I'd ring up in the middle of the street saying, "I'm where I should be and there's no Dillons." And I said, "Oh yeah, since yesterday it's a Waterstone." And there was a famous case when I was in, it was in Sheffield, and I was having a signing in a mall, and I could see my queue. I followed my queue till we got to the bookshop. I went to sit down where they told me to go to the back of the queue. So I walked to the back of the queue past sniggering fans, and tapped the guy on the back, the last guy on the back, and said, "Chum, this is your lucky day." And then I think the people in the shop had realised that the whole of the queue had turned. And suddenly I was being ushered to the. But I insisted that my new friend from the back of the queue came. In those days, it was kind of interesting because I really was totally anonymous, and indeed, the first book, Colour of Magic, was serialised on Woman's Hour, and as a result of it, I think the first hardcover edition sold out. Woman's Hour, those were the days when Woman's Hour really was Woman's Hour, and a flagship programme of the BBC. And grizzled construction workers would listen to it on the way home.
Yeah. When I was a student, I used to get up when Women's Hour.
But it always had good stuff. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But then they moved it to 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was.
You could still taste the toothpaste at that time of day. And they became very supportive. But the thing is, the name Terry is unisex. I've heard of unisex, but I've never actually had it. And then after they serialised Equal Rights, it was assumed by a lot of people that I must be female. There is probably a reasonably strong stand of feminism in the Discworld books, depending on which books you read. I don't particularly wish to be a woman, but I do like their company. And it was very odd to get letters, a guy with a beard addressed to me and talking to me on the assumption that I was a woman.
Now, Terry, since you've come onto the subject of how the books were being published, the mechanism, the way they were being publicised, I'd like to dial back a little and get up on stage the man who played a key role in the first appearance of the Discworld books to the public. So if we can get your publisher and then your agent, Colin Smile, up onto the stage. So Colin, how did you first meet Terry?
My first memory of meeting Terry was on the doorstep of my home.
Right? Absolutely correct. Was I not hanging around outside?
Well, it may have been since you rang the doorbell.
What actually happened, I got there early to the interview, and I thought I'd better not, I was in awe of you at the time.
An 18-year-old, you see, at that time.
And I thought I'd better be there on time. And of course, hanging around in the richer parts of Gerrard's Cross, the most expensive area to live in anywhere in the British Isles, has been through my agent to live there. But a passing policeman asked me what I was doing. Because I'd actually been stationary for about 30 seconds. Just a little anecdote you probably weren't aware of.
That's true.
Okay, do carry on. You published a book by the headmaster of Eton, I think.
You would come to interview my colleague Gilbert van Duren, who had edited a collection of essays and interviews on education in the 70s, which included the headmaster of Eton, the chairman of all the government committees at that time. And whether at that occasion, it must have been fairly soon afterwards, you actually mentioned that you had, on a following visit, that you had written a children's book, and would we like to see it?
It was only halfway through though at that point. Because I sent you the first half and the kind of resume of the second.
Bow to your better memory. I honestly don't know. I mean, you've been writing so many of the stories in the Buxley Press.
What I've been doing is a short story in the Buxley Press.
Okay, still on Terry.
A large local newspaper on which I worked. No one ever wanted to do the children's corner, but I did. So the original story of the Carpet People was done as a little serial on Fridays.
What was your first little serial?
It was indeed. And in fact, I was writing in my spare time
Assuming we should pretty much keep this short.
what you might call a large-scale story, and then editing it down to the tiny, tiny little bits. It was a very strange thing to do. I mean, it would kill me to try to do it these days. So the manuscript was there ready and waiting. But I was still at that point. I think we were only halfway through the story, and so was I. But I sent it to Colin. And what did you do, Colin?
You published it.
Well, actually, you sent me a cheque and a contract.
Well, there was actually two, yes. It was a remarkable piece of work. There was no way you could not publish something like that that had been written by when you were only 17.
Could I just say, how much fiction had you published before, Colin?
One, I think. A novel by Maurice Collis.
Oh, I was the first.
I think that you were the first. I mean, because at the time that the book took before it got published, certainly Collis came out in the 60s.
Yes.
But you only came out in 71. This was because he was finishing it off and tidying it up, but he was also illustrating it.
And getting married and stuff like that.
Yeah. But the illustrations took a while, and I think the last ones that he drew for it were in about 1970 or early 71. And
in those days, I thought this is what the author had to do. I mean, the 2 pins I would have pulped the paper with my teeth.
To have an author who was also an excellent illustrator was great.
I think the word enthusiastic illustration.
Yes. And we launched it at Heel's Carpet Department on Tottenham Court Road. And they introduced a special drink for it called the Essence of Underlay. Unfortunately, the recipe was lost in this depths of time. But Terry did inscribe the books. And one of those, which he signed for me with anti-later coloured, at great expense of time, without without much return financially, I don't think. He said, and may this book make lots of money.
And eventually,
and thereafter, Terry, when we get away from growing New Age vegetables, decided to do some writing in the evenings. I mean, he was, and so we arrived with Dark Side of the Sun, and then Strata. And then in the year that we published Strata, we actually signed Terry for a collection of 4 short stories.
God, was it really like that?
It was, the contract said 4 stories.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. So we never actually signed a contract, as it were, for Colour of Magic as a novel?
No.
Oh.
And you never actually then delivered on the contract you signed?
Technically speaking, I suppose Colin could endeavour to sue me. On the other hand, since he still possesses quite most of his sanity, the chances of this happening are extremely remote.
It was 4 short stories. We knew short stories.
Yeah.
We had some difficulty in getting the American publishers to take it because they didn't like the idea of a book being short stories. Short stories don't sell.
But they were linked.
Yes, justified.
We could have pitched it differently, I suppose.
But certainly that was a problem at that time. Sea Wisdom said that short stories do not sell. And we had to convince people otherwise.
And in those days, we thought that the American publishers knew what they were doing as well. Could I just... I believe, was it not a runaway bestseller as a genre book? I know people like Roger Payton were saying how they couldn't keep it on the shelves in the shop.
I remember them saying in 1987 that, remember the Andromeda book drawer? Always had that sort of rundown of bestsellers, and 2 years later he was still at the #1, better than any of the other recent books that had come out. And he was saying that the paperbacks are selling better than all those subsequent paperbacks that appeared. It was as if it had only just been published. We were there at #1 in that list.
Right.
Then.
Now, Colin would be too modest to say this, but this then confronted him with something of a dilemma. Because as book followed book, he, as a small press publisher, was faced with something that a small press publisher dreads: a bestseller. Because when you have to print lots and lots of books and have the infrastructure to move them around the country, and indeed handle the other thing, things start to become a wee bit difficult. Now, I may have compacted the passage of time a little. And so Colin and I had a little discussion about this. You will correct me when I come to a wrong detail.
He said, well, we are still friends.
Well, yes, well, that is right. That's right.
Let us rearrange the agreement.
Well, what I think I said was, I would like you to remain, you obviously would continue to publish the titles that you had bought as my publisher. And Colin went off and thought about this, and he arranged for my hardcovers to be published by Gollins, and my paperbacks to continue to be published by Transworld, who'd already picked up the paperback rights. I think I'm right with this. And then there was, and Colin would indeed be my agent. And then I let him think about this for a while, and I phoned him up and said, Colin, as my agent, would you have advised me to sign the contracts that I have signed with you in the past? And I believe he had the decency to say, of course not.
What else could I say?
So we really, and I mean, I have to say, with absolute, with ease and goodwill on all sides, we renegotiated things, and And that very nearly brings us to the present day.
He did actually say at that time, and I found it very flattering, he said of all the agents he knew, he distrusted me least.
When it comes to agents, that is flattering.
So, at this stage, where there's a change of status between your relationship, then you'd also, I take it, by this point, acquired, well, a fan base.
Initially, I didn't know. I remember the first time, I believe the first signing I did was at Andromeda Books in Birmingham. And I think I signed for very nearly 40 minutes. I thought, oh, big time. But everyone had got everything that was out. And Roger Payton, if I remember rightly, he'd heard that, was it Dark Side of the Sun was going to be remaindered. I know he bought up a lot of remaindered copies, which I think somehow went back on sale.
Of which book?
Well, of one of the books in paperback.
Certainly we'd had the problem with NEL,
Well, yes.
Corgis version, before they remained it.
Yeah.
Early books. I bought a few.
It's in the best editions of publishing that just as I was about to be successful, some of my books were being remaindered, as I recall. Oh, it might not be true, but heavens, it's a lot better than the truth would have been. But and so there was quite a lot to do, and those, well, you could tell, if you look at a book I signed in those days, every single vowel and consonant in my name is visible. And even then I had to sign my name several times when I bought petrol on the way home because my signature would no longer look like the one on my MasterCard. So there was a period up until the late 80s. And in fact, I think it was probably the Mort tour where I began to see that I actually had a fandom. Up to that point, there would be fans. And an hour and a half of signing was like a really big deal.
Because I'd like to call up onto the stage a man who can not only tell us what it's like to have been a part of the Discworld fan community from an early stage, but also then made the transition.
Could I just stop you at this point? One of the things my books do is celebrate the commonality of mankind. I am proud of this. I make the characters in my books are human beings. They are all human beings. And I am a human being with a particularly weak bladder. So could I please excuse myself very briefly? They used to say that even Homer sometimes nods, and I think that even Socrates occasionally went to the lavatory.
Okay, can we get camera 3 going now?
This was a dead man, ladies and gentlemen. But Corona is such a drinkable beer.
What I'd like to do now to fill the gap is to get a man up on stage who did make a transition from within Terry's fan club to working for Terry. Not least because now we're getting the opportunity to give us the dirt behind Terry's back while he's out there. So please make a big noise for a man who doesn't often come out into the public. Terry's PA, Rob.
Hello. Okay. When he comes back in, can you all ask him for a pay rise for me? We really appreciate it. I was going to say all of this in front of Terry, but it's been a hell of a ride. It really has. I've known Terry for about 16 years, and I've been working with him for about 8 of those. And obviously the past 12 months have turned all of that on the head. It's been an amazing time. It's been an incredible time, and looking at him on stage now, you wouldn't think there's anything wrong. And I don't want to harper on about the Alzheimer's right now, but it's been it really has been an incredibly stressful time for him. And seeing him here and in front of you guys, just a quick thank you from me, to everyone. The mail that we're getting. The mail mountain it really is a mountain. Terry says there's snow on the top of it and little men climbing up it. But you're really keeping them going, and you're keeping our spirits up, because it hasn't been a particularly happy time in the office, and we wind each other up mercilessly, and it's because of you guys. The mail that comes in, half of it we haven't even got a chance to read, let alone reply to. But it really does keep us going, knowing that he's got such a fantastic fan base. So from me, I just want to say thank you, and good on you, everybody. I'm going to take a seat, and Terry will be back in a moment, no doubt. Where do I start? I've known Colin Smythe longer than I've known Terry, and I worked with Colin Smythe in Gerrard's Cross. And we had a great time, but the call of the country, I'm sorry, it was just too great, I'm afraid, and no, not a suburbanite, and I made the move down to Wiltshire to work with Terry, who's now going to... Oh, shit! You see, I told you I'd be in trouble, there you are, I should be at home.
You said you were going home to do the VAT.
I did say I was going home to do the VAT. Sorry, I don't think Terry heard that, everybody. What was that? I think that was pay rise, Terry. I don't know where they got that from. A pay rise, I don't know where they got that from, honestly.
So can I just, Rob, can you tell us again when it was that you first realised that all of Terry's books are actually written by Colin?
It's absolutely true. And
nothing you say here will affect your career development in any way.
Okay, I've got witnesses, so I'm okay.
I tell you what, for the first time, do things right, and Patch, the office cat, will no longer be Employee of the Month. A post that she has held, I think, for about 7 years.
She has indeed, yeah. I was just talking to Terry about the incredible ride, and over the last year, the mail mountain that seems to have taken over the middle of the office. And we've learned many things over the years. Number one. No one asks for just one favour.
Number two.
No one ever says thank you. And it's true. No one ever asks for just one favour, and no one ever says thank you. And we put up with that, and it's just one of those things we do. But there's a group of guys at Classic FM who not only do they say thank you for helping out, they then give you something twice as much for helping them out that you've then got to say thank you for. But are they thanking you now, or are we thanking them? I don't know where we are now. We seem to have got our own box at the Royal Albert Hall.
Classic FM, they said, would I mind being, if they could advertise dinner with Terry Pratchett as part of an auction that they were doing. And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. I didn't think much of it. And I heard that a lady had bid £4,000 to have dinner with me. I understood that she had registered for this convention. I believe that the lady who was second at a paltry £2,000 to have dinner with is probably in this audience.
Oh.
Are you in this audience? Then she's somewhere in the hotel. So off we went, and she was a very attractive lady, and her husband was with her. Shucks. But Rob was with me, so double shucks anyway. And it turned out that her husband did the pyrotechnics and gunfire stuff at Pinewood Studios. And this was just the time when I was coming to the end of Nation, and needed to know about bullets and the dynamics of bullets fired underwater and what happened. And he said, fine, I'm on it. And then he went back to Pinewood and started firing all kinds of guns into the swimming pool and things like that. Yeah. Well, he let most of the people get out. and said, yeah, you know, there was a big thing in Nation about where my hero is fired on while he's in a lagoon. And it is a fact that probably it's worse if you're shot at with an old pistol. But if you're shot at with a high velocity bullet, there's a very good chance the bullet will probably break up on the surface of the water if it's really high velocity. Or depending on how it hits, you'll probably be able to turn around and watch it gently cavitating as it goes slowly and slower and slower towards you. Because water is really very thick. As if you've ever belly flopped off the top of the top diving board, you know this. And at a certain speed, it's very, very similar to concrete. And it sounds great. And then they said, and thank you for doing this, so we'd like to invite you to a box at the Albert Hall. When they were doing things, was it the Star Trek thing?
Yeah, and also this...
No, it wasn't Star Trek, it was more... you're the one you like.
Doctor Who.
No, that was the other one.
That was the other one, yeah.
No, it was the Star Wars. And then they also came down for an interview and brought me a load of DVDs.
And then thanking you for that.
That was nice. That made up for all the other ones and say, oh, can I be really cheeky and ask for another 15 for my son?
Yeah, there's so much of that.
Yeah.
There's a few things I remember over the years. I think number one was my first mention in the press as looking like a grown-up Harry Potter. That one there.
If I thought he looked like Harry Potter, he wouldn't have grown up.
I think the second one was in the days before wireless networking, connecting Terry's office and my office, which were about 150 yards away. We decided the only way to do it was actually to put the wiring overhead, and we would make it all very neat and lovely. And we decided one lightning strike is going to kill the next novels, and that's not such a good idea. So we'll put it underground. So how are we going to do this? I came in, army boots, trousers, and I dug a hole between your office and my office, and it was 150 feet long by 3 foot deep, and it took me all week. But the last thing on the Friday afternoon, connecting those computers up, and they were talking. To me, digging a hole for you was a real achievement.
I must say, Rob is particularly good at sorting out computer problems caused by the last thing Rob did to the computer.
It's entirely true. Another thing I suppose I have to mention is our most recent trip. And thank you very much for introducing me to first-class travel across the Atlantic, which means I can never...
he goes into an aeroplane and he turns right.
It was an education to Terry to realise that, in fact, when you're at the front, and there's only about
right.
8 to 10 of you up there, there's actually a whole aeroplane full of people.
Yeah.
I opened the curtain and showed him, and he was really
thought that
surprised.
was a power supply.
But some of you might know, we've just got back from the States. We went over to LA, where we spent 5 days in various basements at UCLA, and we met some of the most eminent scientists, Alzheimer's specialists, and quite bizarrely, I can say we had a great time. It was a really interesting time. I think our families were expecting us to be sunning ourselves on the beach. But when you watch this back on the documentary, you see my interview is on the beach at Santa Monica and the sun's shining, and when they pull back and they get a nice wide shot, I'm the only person for 100 miles wearing long trousers. So you can see that was entirely unexpected. And that was a good trip, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we went to Rochester and met the world's... Because I think of him as Dr. Duffy, because he likes being called Dr. Duffy. What's his first name? Charles. Yeah. And learned quite a lot about the disease from him, some of it which cheered me up no end. And then, that was a good thing.
And there's one other thing that you taught me, the one final thing I've mentioned, is that you don't have to keep the box for everything.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. The whole mezzanine in my office is full of the box. You keep the box in case you want to send it back, or you keep the box. You keep the damn box in case you want to sleep in it when you've been sacked.
What else can Patch play in for the box?
Oh, yes. The cat disappears into the boxes.
But it's been a hell of a ride, and thank you very much.
Hasn't stopped yet.
Absolutely.
If you're watching this on DVD, there's more footage of Rob on the beach in different kinds of outfits in the bonus material. Now, you were acquiring an expanding fan club, as evidenced by Rob moving out of the fan community into your employ. And so you started to acquire within that fan club, people started to emerge who were helping realize the Discworld and create the sculpture.
Could I mention something about that? It all happened in a kind of a disjointed way. I can't remember when the Guild of Fans and Disciples started. That was one thing. There were other kind of attempts at starting a Discworld fan club, which never really took off. And I didn't take any of this really seriously. It wasn't that I discouraged it or encouraged it. I just didn't think it really applied to me, because I thought of myself as a fan who wrote rather than an author. And in fact, I never really got serious about it until the late 80s, when in fact I actually quit the day job, and that was it. Well, I was a professional author then, and that was all there was to it. But everything else was a kind of series of happy accidents, really. I think people got in touch with me and wanted to do things, and I was bemused and said, yeah, whatever.
Well, if you were becoming the central star of a growing fan community, I'd like to call up on stage one of the biggest satellites and welcome up on stage the cunning artificer, Mr. Bernard Pearson.
Hello. Hello, Terry.
Hello, Bernard.
Oh, sorry, Terry.
Remember the script we discussed, Bernard?
Bernard, how did you first meet Terry?
It was in a bar. Not the way that there was an Umpar band playing in the background.
Yeah, it was Covent Garden.
Covent Garden.
Right.
And I brought with me a small model of Rincewind, which Terry had drawn out, and sent us a little lovely little drawing of Rincewind and Granny Weatherwax. And I bought this little drawing of little sculpture of Rincewind, and I'm deaf in that ear, and Terry was sitting sort of like there, and there's this bloody Umpar band going on in the background. And I didn't know whether he liked it or thought it was horrible, except he smiled and wouldn't give it back. So, and that really was the first bit I produced. And from there on in, it's gone downhill.
Was there a point when you realised that you'd moved completely, the Discworld output was the majority of what you were doing?
I think with any craftsman, Discworld is a toy box. Is a toy box full of toys that a very clever person has put in there for me to play with, and it's just amazing that you can actually get in amongst these toys and have such enormous fun, more fun than you really should have. and still make a shilling out of it. So it's very seductive, and it's seductive because what's there, you know, the ingredients you get to play with is limitless, and it's even more limitless with the later books than the early ones.
And of course, eventually, you were given the license to print money.
No, don't go there. That license, yes. Occasionally, I mean, things work and things don't work, and then things work where the stamps were done as a joke. Really, I mean, it was. I said something to Terry. It was Terry who saw the possibilities of the stamps, and I think he knew that I had the arse hanging out my trousers. So he actually.
You always have the arse hanging out.
He got Transworld to commission the first series of stamps, and of course, what that has done has created probably one of the most successful. What are known as Cinderella stamps ever to be produced. We've produced over 1 million of them. But that was a direct result of something that I produced, showed to Terry. Terry really saw it and said, what about if? And then he came up with some ideas about the falling tower, and the whole thing of that.
I think the thing was, my role with Bernard, something that you haven't actually mentioned, because bear in mind that 50% of the people here have never come to a Discworld Convention. Which rather suggests that they're not too immersed in kind of Discworld history. You were Clare Craft.
Yes, I started Clare.
And were you still Clare Craft when you had held the first class Clare Craft event?
Yes.
Which was like a kind of mini convention. It was camping or staying in local bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Up in a field not far from Bury St Edmunds.
That's right, Woolbit, yeah.
And the wonderful Pam Gower, who fortunately is still very dynamically with us, won Best in Show in the Masquerade as Granny Weatherwax.
The ultimate Granny Weatherwax.
Dear little librarian type lady got up on the stage in a witch's outfit, turned round and was Granny Weatherwax, and everyone went.
She pointed at where Terry and I were standing. She pointed at Terry, and she just pointed. She didn't say anything. And it was like the air turned to ice.
So that was it, instant acclaim from it. But if I remember rightly, was it second in the show was Gaspo the Wonder Dog?
Yes.
Actually played by a dog.
Yes.
Yeah. And someone went and bought, cool, this applies, I know, someone went and bought a hot dog from the burger bar outside the barn for this award. I think Pam got something a bit better than that.
Pam very better than that.
And so that led, we better outline, I suppose, the brief history of Clarecraft.
Well, Clarecraft was an outfit which my wife and I, Isabel and I, started off in the 80s, producing fantasy sculpture. I mean, that's what I used to do. I used to make wizards and dragons and Merlins and Gandalfs. So it was not and it was a ceramics, we made pottery, but also we made pieces in resin. So it was looking at Discworld as having such an enormous potential for making objects, collections. And so yes, we started producing Discworld figurines, some of which now are changing hands for almost as much as people pay for them on eBay. And others, which I have to say, some were sculpted by some very, very clever people, and some of the most fantastically wonderful pieces could no longer be made in this country, which is a great shame.
I think that's actually, although it passed into new management with Bob and Fish Baker, what killed it was that, to be frank, Mr. Hong in China can make things a whole lot. And they were committed to having things made locally. Bernard had passed on to other things at that point.
Yeah.
But I think a case could be made that the Clarecraft events, which went on for quite a few years, in fact, even alternated with the first Discworld
Yes,
event.
indeed. Yeah.
They were the things that actually brought a core fandom together.
It was the start, really, wasn't it? It was the first gathering of the fans in fields in far off Somerset, and they had a tremendous vitality. I mean, Oh, Essex it was. But Suffolk.
At the very first one, at the masquerade, I suggested that there were 5 rincewind,
Yes.
including a little lad.
Yes.
And I suggested that the way to find the best rincewind was to have a race. So I held up a £5 note at one end of the field. It may even have been a tenner. And Adrian Emery, among others, raced towards me, and I have a clear vision of Adrian's huge besandaled feet. I sincerely hope that they're going to stop, but in fact, God bless them all, they all slowed down a bit so that the kid won.
They were the start of what is now, what you're all doing here, really. It's been an interesting journey.
Oh, well, there was the occasion when, of course, there was always the launch of a rocket at the end.
The
wonderful moment then when it came down and landed on the bonnet of my jag. Oh, how we laughed!
Yes. Discworld fandom, I think, has got, it reaches parts that are not even named.
My jag.
There's always interesting things happening.
And I'd like to call up on stage now another man who's done a lot to flesh out and offer alternative interpretations of the Discworld. Could we have the incarnation of the patrician and much more? Could we have Stephen Briggs up on stage, please?
When we say Guards, as readers will know, in Guards, when the brethren all meet, the first time they meet, there's a noblest man amongst them who's walked into the wrong meeting. And we thought it would be quite a wheeze to get the author to be that person. So for the early part of the run, I played that one-liner, and last night, Terry came on robed and masked, and said in the wings, well, what happens if I don't say the lines right? Because well, you can't not say the lines right. What we're getting is neat Pratchett, just straight from the author's mouth. Standard gasps from our crowd.
Terry, can I ask how you felt when you first saw your books dramatized?
I love amateur dramatics. I mean, the important thing about amateur dramatics is not that it should be good. Is that that it should end in time for all the viewers and cast to be in the pub with time for a final drink before they stop serving. And I think it could be said that the very ethos of the STC has that in mind. I mean,
absolutely.
You go in. Is it the board face? It is, isn't it?
Yes.
Within 5 minutes, I think, of the curtain going down, and there is so much grease paint that you would have thought the village people had been shown. I was actually overjoyed, particularly about Mort, and in fact, that was a kind of golden age because that was when we had the side made that glowed in the dark, and I had one made for me, and the death costume, which remained the most perfect death costume right up until the wonderful ones that mobbed it. And there was a whole string done, one after the other. And in fact, you have hardly missed one ever since. Have you actually missed a year?
I think we missed 1 year, and I can't remember quite why it was. The year of his life of Brian must have been a year that either you didn't write one, or you wrote one that was impossible to stage. Thank you. And
but you got back
point, which Discworld book came out in 1996?
Oh, come on, you lot!
A room packed with 800 so-called fans.
If you want to press the red interactive button on your TV,
Actually, season time, would that be about right? It would be about right. You could, but of course now, you could stage season time because you know how to do it.
Yes. Not badly.
No, the thing is that this is you talking. The ones that look hard are easy to stage.
It's true.
Because
yes.
it's the old fourth wall. I mean, Shakespeare knew that. You know, all that stuff about oh for a muse of fire, which means that we cannot afford the extras. So we want you to imagine out there's a giant dragon about to ravage the city. Got it? Right? Okay. Right, now back to Corporal Knobs because we can afford to stage him.
That's right. I mean, we stage Antony and Cleopatra. There's a scene in Antony and Cleopatra where the whole battle of Actium between the Roman and Egyptian navies takes place, and it's described by two blokes standing on a hill. You know, that's the SDC approach to Discworld. It's difficult. It happens over there.
It was an interesting situation arose fairly soon because other people started to ask if they could adapt Discworld, and B, if they could use Stephen's adaptations. And sometimes they said, no, we want to do our own adaptations, and we'd find out that they differed from Stephen's adaptations by about one line. And that was another interesting period, in fact, because we wanted to raise money. We thought, we'd like this to happen, but people should pay something, so the money would go to the Orangutan Foundation. And regretfully, not everybody thought it necessary to pay a little royalty, even though it's for charity. But equally, people forgot that fans are fans, and if you're going to advertise a Discworld play, it's going to be on the internet, and we're going to hear about it. And on one occasion, down in the south of England, the director of a Discworld play was phoned up by me in the theatre on the very day of the dress rehearsal and said, "We don't seem to have had any paperwork from you on this one. I'm sure this is a little oversight that can easily be remedied." And we got around that by, in fact, in a kind of official yet informal way, vesting the royalties in the Orangutan Foundation. And Stephen, with a minor stipend from them, I believe, still operates the whole business on their behalf. And that way, if you try and pull a fast one, you're pulling a fast one on a charity, and I look down very harshly on that sort of thing. And it's true to say that Discworld plays have... Is it still true that at any one time there are between 20, 25 Discworld plays still in production?
That must still be the case, yes.
Are they still extending into the newer books?
Yes. Yeah.
The thing is, you see, Weird Sisters is easy to do because everyone knows what it's a parody of. And it's become like Dial M for Murder. Sooner or later, every amateur dramatic group has got to do it. And they've been performed on every continent on the planet.
Well, in Colin's narrow interpretation of continent, yes. It's certainly been done in America, but I don't think South America, but everywhere else, including Antarctica, which is pretty good going. There are not many playwrights, even real ones, that have been produced in Antarctica.
It was by the Australians in their shed. Well, it's a bit more of a shed, but you know what I mean. I mean, it's hardly, sort of high architectural culture in Antarctica. And I think anyway, they're actually played by a man.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But then that's Australians for you. We've all seen Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
They spend a long time in Antarctica, don't they?
There it is. Yeah.
Long,
the performance lasted all evening. In fact, right into October.
No.
In fact, I believe there's a group still down in Adelaide that specialise in doing Discworld plays. I mean, it's probably true now that we don't find out the half of what is going on.
You're right.
But I can now expose the Stephen to the gaze of Fran. He also insists me in the provision of very bad Latin translations of Discworld books. The big joke being that Stephen thought they were the correct Latin. But it's very good because of his contacts in the civil service, where you can always find someone that speaks a language. I say, I need the Russian for "it's turned out a bit chilly again," which in fact it turns out there is no Russian for, because if there was, they would be saying it nearly all the time.
What we found with that was, bizarrely, that there were about 30, I asked in the end about 5 different people for that line for Terry, and there were, I think, 22 different ways of saying it, and genuinely they got down to, you walk out of your house, it's been snowing but it's stopped, there's a slight chill in the air and a slight breeze, and you say, or you look out of your window, it's snowing heavily and it's only just started, so you say. And there are different ways of saying it depending on what the conditions were that led to you saying what the weather was like.
But that actually happens quite a lot. What was the last one?
Latin was the most recent one you asked.
Oh, the Latin or Greek or anything for tackle.
The tackle, yeah.
To tackle or to tackle anything. And it turns out the Romans obviously never tackled anything. but I think he came to tackulatus, did we not?
I think it sounded good.
At least sounds like
it should have been there.
He sounds like a general. The thing about Latin is that there's either a whole bloody sentence for something that we have in one word, or they have in one word something for which we have a whole damn sentence. And Stephen is also a kind of test bed for. Also, of course, he's the world expert and mortal, and I'm still working on the revised map.
I believe so, yes.
Yes. So he has to keep up to date with things, and I periodically ring him up and say what are Muslim rib curries full range of degrees in the wards. And if you want to walk from this part of Ankh-Morpork to another part, exactly what do you pass through? Because the map isn't entirely updated, and I live in dread that someone actually complained once, Sergeant Colon and Nobby Nobbs have a conversation between these two places, but I measured it, and they were talking for only 3 minutes, and it would take at least 10 minutes to walk that distance. Okay, I wish I'd known that, because I then would have put in, and then they walked in silence. Believe me, it doesn't happen quite so much these days, but there used to be quite a lot of that. Oh, do you know? And sometimes I write back and say, I don't care. Not really, no. It probably happened in a different book, different universe. Quantum. It was quantum. It
would have been nice if we could have assembled all the artists who contributed to the Discworld books. Obviously that's not possible.
Especially not in the case of Josh, let's be fair.
But we have done our best to get messages from some of the people that the fans will recognise who have played the part. So if the technical gods are with us, could we have the clip from Trevor, please?
How did you first meet Terry, Trevor?
It was through Bernard. He had opened up a Discworld emporium in the wilds of absolutely nowhere, and we lived nearby, and I went in one day and we got talking, and I saw something, and I just said I could make a game out of that, and Bernard was interested and said, well, go away and come up with some ideas. So I knocked about 24 ideas together, and the idea he liked best of all was one of trolls and dwarfs, so went away, made a game. Bernard sculpted it, and then at one of Bernard's great Wincanton do's, we presented the game to the fans just for testing, and people sat down and played the game all afternoon, and then the buzz went round that Terry was coming in, and he did, and I stood right beside him, and he asked a question, and luckily for me, because I was completely gobsmacked, Becky was there. She answered the question, and she and the friend who she was playing against, they then explained the whole game to Terry and told him why it was a great game, and I just sidled off into the corner and sat in a chair until he'd gone.
Hi Terry, we're really sorry we can't be with you at this very special convention. Congratulations on 60 years old and 25 years of Discworld. It's an incredible achievement, and I've got to thank you for all the belly laughs, all the tickled ribs, and most of all for writing the definitive book on comparative religion. And for me personally, even more important perhaps, I've got to thank you for changing the way I design and make games. You're right up there with Martin Gardner in affecting my life. All the best. Bye.
And we also have an audio clip, a phone message from Paul Kidby, if that's possible. Okay, Paul, that's running.
Hi Terry, I have many happy memories of working with you on various Discworld projects, one of which was when you came to collect some of the water lilies that had taken over the pond in my back garden. There I was, standing in a pond, discussing possible illustrations of Cohen the Barbarian with the best-selling author of the Discworld books, who was up to his armpits in thick, muddy water, pulling out clumps of lilies whilst being bombarded by the frogs who were beating a hasty exit. For some strange reason, this seems to be one of the meetings we had that first springs to my mind. Anyway, I'd just like to say thank you for all the inspiration. It's been great working with you. Oh, and thanks for the nettle soup recipe. It still comes in handy. Wishing you all the very best, Paul. Okay? Was that okay?
I remember that occasion. Paul and his family were living not very far away from us, and we just built a new pond, and he inherited a pond which was overgrown with water lilies. And I knew that water lilies, expensive though they are in the shops, in the garden centres, they grow like weeds. And so I said, well, can I trim some of yours? And they propagate very easily. And so I went into this pond, which was rather small, and grabbed hold of the water lilies and lifted and effectively picked up the pond. Because it was so full of mature water lilies that they'd filled it edge to edge, and there was this kind of water lily pie that formed the shape of the pond. And I took it out, and there was a bit of grey water underneath, full of very, very angry frogs. And I took out tons of water lilies, it seemed, and the beautiful, lovely sort of damask white ones. And then we pushed the rest back for the frogs. So the pond with practically no water in. But Paul did sterling work, I think. I am very sorry he feels that his star is now guiding him elsewhere. But I think I love the illustration he did, particularly for Night Watch. Because we have a lot of newcomers here, they may not know that when Rembrandt painted the original on Night Watch, he painted himself in, looking at the back, looking over the shoulders of one of the guards. Josh Kirby became the late Josh Kirby only a few months before Night Watch was ready to be have its cover done, and I went off to his funeral, and we were all very sad about this, and I know that Paul respected Josh very much. And so when I saw the painting that Paul had done, which was, as I suggested, based on Night Watch, but with the Discworld figures replacing the Dutch figures, there was Josh Kirby's face in the position where Rembrandt's face was in the original. And Paul had actually painted his predecessor as the Discworld artist into the picture. And I thought that was wonderful. And it's, for those of you who actually look for it, it clearly is Josh Kirby. You can see the eyes and just part of the face. And it's Josh Kirby, and I thought that was a wonderful tribute you die, and you go to Discworld.
We're nearly at the final guests here. I'd like to get up on stage now two men who worked with you on books that brought out quite a different side of the Discworld than the more conventional artists you worked with have done. So can we have up on stage, please, Jack Cohen and Ian Stewart.
Hi there. You need to hold it a bit closer to your mouth, Jack.
Try this.
Now, I have to ask the pair of you, did you ever think at the start of your academic careers that you would find yourself working in the field of fantasy literature?
I was a mathematician. No, absolutely not. No, it wasn't what I expected at all. I'm very pleased it happened, but I wouldn't have predicted it.
No, I wouldn't have predicted it. But on the other hand, halfway through my academic career, I found myself trying to buy a pet shop. So it wasn't totally beyond belief that I'd go and do something quite different. I also got mixed up with science fiction authors quite early on, inventing alien backgrounds, and that crept up on me. I was, from about 1972, I was involved with science fiction authors, inventing things for them, and that happened parallel with working on sperms and important things like that.
Terry, how did the Science of Discworld books?
Well, I think the word NovaCon comes somewhere in this conversation because that's where I met Jack, and I think you then brought Ian along to them. NovaCons were kind of relaxer-cons. I mean, Discworld is automatically a relaxer-con. It's where you relax, or rather, where everyone relaxes except me. But NovaCon's really where you went to meet old friends. And we got friendly and talked about things. I remember on one occasion there was Dr. Heinz Wolf and Jack Cohen met in a corridor, and they both have what you might call semi-Einstein haircuts. And so it was as it were two mad scientists meeting, and I was privileged to be there, and they kind of tried to out-mad scientists each other. The hairstyles were spinning out of control. But the nice thing about Jack, and indeed about Ian, because originally Ian was the guy who was just behind Jack, being quiet. That's because when you're with Jack, you usually have no alternative but to be quiet. And the lovely thing about working with them, I mean, Jack Cohen, gentlemen, will tell you more about your sperm than you really want to know. And Jack Cohen will come up with things like, well, actually, there are some creatures that don't have death built in. They will go on living until something causes them to die. You remember you were telling me about the songbirds and the deep sea fish, and the tip of crocuses being 2 degrees higher than the surrounding environment as they push their way up through the snow. I'm bloody good at this sort of thing, actually. Because it's the sort of thing an author remembers. And the great thing is that I have no idea how the Science of Discworld came up, and I don't think any of us really do. It was great fun working with them. And what is good is you can phone up either of them and ask them a science-type question without having to explain yourself. No one's going to say,
well, what do you want to do that for? So I thought, okay, Jack, if I actually graft a man's arm onto a woman's body, how long would that arm stay male? And it doesn't say, what are you, some kind of pervert or what? He just says, is the woman very athletic? This is all going to be about testosterone. You know? And when I say, Jack, I want to discuss the genealogy of werewolves, because what I wanted was to put together a genealogy that would allow for the type of werewolves that I have both in Discworld and which also appear in fiction. So how you can have werewolves which are like wolves and werewolves which are like hairy people. And then Jack didn't start off by saying, but there are no such things as werewolves. He took it as a given that we're going to have werewolves. And here's not actually the perfect genealogy that you could have, because they are after all fictional characters, but a genealogy which is good enough for folk music, as they say. And with Ian, for example, we had a pleasant time when we phoned him up and worked out the dimensions of heaven. Because I'm sure you all know your Bible, and the Book of Revelation has always been one of my favourites. And the dimensions of heaven in cubits are given there. And Ian actually pointed out that people don't have much of a grasp of volume. So acreage we can sort of work out. And once you start taking volume into account, it's amazing how big something really becomes. And I believe we worked out that heaven is about the size of the moon. Would look very much like a bored cube. And this is on facts in the Bible, so it must be true. And we were working it out, and it didn't really work out that depending on how much space you left for God and all the heavenly hosts, who by their very nature would be transubstantial and therefore not actually take up much room, wasn't there room for everybody who has been or will be remotely human to have a suite rather bigger than the best you can get at the Holiday Inn? And possibly room for some of the animals as well. And there have been other things, because yes, it was with not Thief of Time. Yes, it was Thief of Time. That's where we had the four horsemen, the fifth horseman rather. And I said to Ian, I want something to be so cold it's hot. And he said, funny thing, there's just been some speculations around it 2 degrees above absolute or something like that. There was some point where cold acted like heat. Can you remember the detail?
Well, he's going to have to give us the answer on the bonus section.
Because you've got someone on the line, yeah?
Because we are running out of time.
Oh, okay.
I should just say that
can I just finish to say, it was great working with them, because it allowed them to indulge themselves as fantasy and science fiction writers, and I could indulge myself as a scientist.
I should just say that we're just about to finish, but if for some reason this stage collapses suddenly with the combined creative output of this Discworld stage on it, Ox can give you the contact details for the next Harry Potter convention. Now, we have one special guest left to give a brief message, because we managed to get a long distance message from a very special guest. Can we have the rather misleadingly titled Clip 1, please?
Terence David John Pratchett. Ah, yes. I trust today goes well with you, up until now, that is. I am mortified that I could not be there in person, as it were, to speak at this event, but alas, even I cannot be in 2 places at once. There was some talk of having me represented by a look-alike, but at your convention, but unfortunately the one we have here on Discworld was busy at Commander Vimes' son's birthday party. We did look around on your own world, but sadly there was no one who looked sufficiently like me to pass close inspection, I understand. So we are forced to use this omniscope to pass on our message. Mr. Pratchett, I owe you an enormous debt, as do many other characters on Discworld. Without your intervention, our lives would have gone less well remarked, shall we say. Would not have been so widely recognised, as it were. I have read with interest some of your more recent writings. Unseen University Academicals, Raising Taxes, and my personal favourite, thank you, John, Lord Veterinary goes to Kirin Island again. I'm going to be a fantasy, and I've not been there myself. I'm very grateful to be able to take this moment of your time to thank you on behalf of myself and many other characters on Discworld, whether they be alive, dead, or in some other complicated form of existence. In recognition of your service, we'd like to present you with this key to the city of Ankh-Morpork. It is not, of course, practical. The gates of Ankh-Morpork have not been locked for many centuries now. Oh, you're still here, and in your own time. Well, do get back to your desk. These books don't write themselves, you know. So I'm told. Go away and make money.
Terry Pratchett, this is your word.
They say the gates of Ankh-Morpork are unlockable. They are now. I know they want to get you out because of the next program. To which I respond, who is the creator in this facility? This genuinely won't take a moment, and I would like you to scurry off as soon as I have finished. But I can't let this pass without a final word from me, although I have been participating wholeheartedly throughout this entire event. One thing about Discworld is that it is indeed a very popular series. I say without any particular false modesty that I am the best-selling adult author in the country, and actually one of the biggest-selling authors in the world. But no one kind of knows about it, including me. But sometimes I'm reminded. What is actually nice is that Discworld and its fandom have always been, in a curious way, parochial, but at the same time widely available. Everything has been a size that I could manage. There has never been any really big merchandising. The movies, I am glad to say, are done by people who have become personal friends, and I can have a major influence on what happens. All the people on the stage now are personal friends. Most of you are personal friends. In fact, I'll break into tears in a minute if I really believe what I was saying. There is a friendliness about it that I really appreciate. And that's why I'm particularly chuffed this time to find that there are so many new people there. And I believe Bernard is particularly pleased, and has actually put in to buy a new cash register. And so, you know, all in all, I'm kind of really very pleased about how things went, because how things have gone, and how things are still going, because it's kind of a human size thing. It's an empire, but it's a tiny little empire, you know, a bit like the Isle of Wight. But it means I can see from one side of it to the other. Thank you very much indeed for being part of it. All of you, and all of you, thank you.